Smart Buildings Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 350. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 350 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we are going to be covering what a building automation standard is and why you should be using one in your contracting or system integrator business. So for those of you who are like, man, BAS standards, they're the things owners use to go and define point names and graphics and sequences. Well, yes, those are BAS standards for owners. We're going to be talking about for contractors. We're going to talk about why this matters, what a control standard is for a contractor slash system integrator business. We're going to talk about the difference between a standard, process, and procedure, why you should use these, and then we're going to talk about how do you identify your standards. As always, everything can be found at smartbuildingsacademy.com/350. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/350. So it's good to see you all here. I'm going to check the audio, make sure everything's good since we had an error last time. Looks like everything's good. So we're going to dive in. All right. So why does this even matter to you? I was talking with our sales team this morning on our weekly sales meeting, and we were talking about how when they are calling up customers, every customer is saying that they've got backlog. They got tons of backlog, tons of stuff to do. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, why do people keep choosing to use our training when they are swamped? What is it that they feel that it's a good enough investment to make, even though they're incredibly busy? And we started to dive into like our most popular courses, and we realized that this summer, the courses that sold the most were the ones that were related to processes. You know, our installation course, our programming course, our design course, our sales course, they're all process driven. While we still sold our theory courses, they didn't sell nearly as much as our process courses. And that was really interesting to me as we started to look into the analytics around that. We started to discuss why. And what we came to the conclusion of is everyone is super gung-ho about processes. They're like, oh yeah, processes are great. But they only start to actually implement processes when crap hits the proverbial fan, right? When they start to not have enough people to execute a project, when they are like having a tech working 60 hours a week, they're running from site to site to site. That's when they start to implement processes. And that's like the worst time to implement processes. But you know, it's kind of like you get diagnosed that you have high blood pressure. That's when you start taking action on it. And so that's what we saw in a lot of our customers is they were starting to be overwhelmed and they had to find a way to improve things. So they started implementing processes. How did they implement processes? The quickest way was to just take our programs and copy our processes. But why does this matter to you? And how can you come up with your own processes? That's what we're going to discuss today. So going and creating a standard is the first step to having processes. And by implementing a standard, you are going to go and do what Michael Gerber in E-Myth Revisited says is you're going to take the lowest skilled person and be able to have them do the highest cost task that they can do. So whereas in the past, without a standard on installation, you may have to train each individual person and maybe only trust them with pulling some wire, going and installing some thermostats, things like that. But with a process now, you may trust them with MSTP trunks. You may trust them with controller discovery. You may go and trust them with graphics setup because there's a process in place. And now what does that do? That takes that $20 to $30 an hour tech and you have them doing things that a $30 to $50 more experienced tech programmer, et cetera, may be doing. So you're taking those higher skilled tasks and you're shifting them down to a lower cost, lower skilled labor set. And naturally that lower skilled labor set is more plentiful than the higher skilled labor set. This isn't to demean people. It's just simply a matter of fact. So that's one of the things, right, is being able to execute work with more available talent. The second thing is to reduce callbacks, reduce rework, and to go and eliminate labor-related slippage. So, and ultimately you can actually reduce sub and material related slippage as well. I'm just going to flip my video real quick. It's just giving me little flickers there. I don't know why it's flickering. It's always something with technology, folks. I don't understand why it always does this when I'm on these live sessions, but never anytime else. All right. Anyways, so as I was saying, it is going to go and give you the ability to reduce those price slippages and delays. And the third, it's going to give you a repeatable product that you're delivering to your customers. I know we think the product is the materials we deliver, the controllers, the user interface. The product actually is the deliverable. So anyone can go and buy a controls product and install a controls product. It's how it's installed, the graphics, the programming, the submittal set, the as-built, the O&Ms, the owner training, how all of that is delivered. That is your product. That is, at the end of the day, what's going to differentiate you between that other person who's maybe 10 cents less per point, or 50 cents less per square foot, or whatever costing mechanism you use in your estimates. So what is this controls standard? I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're going to look at a engineering standard. So let's go here, share this. All right, we got this up on the screen right there. Turn off my video, and you all are still hearing me. Yeah, all right, we got it to work this time. Man, that's a step in the right direction. So this is an engineering standard, okay? And for all of you who message me and go, what is this software, Phil? This is Xmind. I use this software to map out our courses, all sorts of stuff. I find it very valuable. So a standard is any approach that's going to include processes, procedures, and supporting documentation for something you do all the time. So right here we did a standard engineering standard. It consists of 3 areas: submittals, programming, and graphics. So when customers come to us from a consultancy perspective and they ask us to help standardize their business and their processes, this is the approach we take. We sit down at a table, we bring in the stakeholders who are involved in this, maybe the engineering manager, maybe the programming manager, the ops manager, and we'll say, all right, what are the common tasks that you do? Well, and let's try to put them in buckets. And those will be submittals, programming, and graphics from an engineering perspective. And then we'll say, okay, what do you need to do to start submittals? And I'll show you this in another format in just a second. But we'll say, what do you need to do? They'll say, well, we need to do takeoffs. Okay, well, what are takeoffs? Well, takeoffs are going and reviewing the bill, creating the bill of materials. They're doing a spec review. They're doing an MEP review, maybe a sales to ops handoff. So we have a process that is this takeoff process. And then we have procedures for each one. And in Wednesday's episode, we're actually going to develop procedures. So this is going to be high level, kind of helping you frame this out. And then Wednesday, we're going to go and we're going to look at how do we actually go and execute these. I'm just checking. Everything's good. Can hear me? Great. That's awesome. All right. The video's not working this time, but the audio is. Oh my gosh. All right. So takeoff process, and then we have our procedures, right? So bill of materials creation procedure. And this procedure is going to be supported by documents. And I know this seems like a lot, but if you really want to grow and scale your business and make it repeatable, this is how you do it. So takeoff process, bill of materials creation procedure, and then we'd have a checklist, and we'd say, okay, as part of this checklist, what do we do? Do we have accurate controller count? Do we have controllers? Do we have accurate product names? Have we checked our ship times and delays and fulfillment times on these products? These would all be in a checklist. Now, a cheat sheet may be something like, okay, you've got an air handler. This is a standard bill of materials for an air handler. That's the cheat sheet. And then the company standard, this is going to be like your Excel sheet that your bill of materials goes in. Maybe it's, controller name on the left, then product name, then description, then quantity, then submittal page. And that is what you put for every bill of materials. So you don't have 5 different people creating 5 different bill of materials formats. There is one bill of materials format, and it's always used, and that is the company standard. So just to recap, checklists are points that you, when you go through the procedure, like the procedure is going to be pretty literal. And sometimes the procedure, and this will get a little meta here, sometimes the procedure will have another procedure in it. So the bill of materials creation procedure may have the spec review procedure in it. So you review the spec as part of the bill of materials creation. And what you'll do in this bill of materials creation checklist is it'll be, okay, perform the spec review procedure, which means ensure that you have the latest specs and addendums. Go and check notes. Did you check notes? Did you check, or well, now I'm thinking of MEP. So for spec, it'd be, did you check section 1 general and your requirements and appropriate vendors and associated sections? Did you check section 2 materials? Okay. Did you check specifics on products, submit any RFIs or RFCs for products that are delayed or just don't make sense? You know, like 4 to 20 milliamp, 1K platinum temperature sensors in an office space, probably overkill. And then, you know, it'll have things like check the execution, which is where you'll get your sequences from. And then maybe it'll have MEP spec sequence mismatch. These are all things that'll be in this procedure. And like I said, on Wednesday, we'll actually draft a procedure together. So I'm just checking questions real quick. All right. Moving right along, we have our programming, right? We have our programming process, sequence, review, and this is just another example, right? This talks through our process, and then you'll have procedures, and the procedures are tactical. Now, the really cool thing, if you do this right, is this will actually, once you map this out, like if you never use our training services at all, like if you took this podcast and ran with it, here's what I would do if I were in your shoes. I would go and I'd create my standard, and I'll talk about how you figure out which standard you create first in just a second. But I'd create my standard. I create my subcategories of my standard. I create my process, right, for that subcategory. And then I would create my procedures. And then guess what? With each procedure that you've created, guess what you've just created? You've created your weekly or monthly training agenda. And what you would do is you would grab all these procedures, you'd put them in an Excel sheet, and you would work with your team to rank these. You would say, okay, this is a 1, this is a 2, this is 3. And then guess what's the first thing you train on? The number 1. Now, how do you figure out the number and priority of procedures and standards? Well, if you've listened to our podcast for any amount of time, you know that I am huge, absolutely huge on job task codes. You should be going and estimating using job task codes. Like, okay, we got this many hours in install, this many hours in programming, this many hours in graphics, this many hours in checkout. And by doing that, and then you should educate your technicians on, hey, and your sales team, we really need to use these job task codes. They help us identify areas of inefficiency so that we can train properly and we can improve our efficiency. Now, if you notice repeatedly that estimating install labor, it's off. Every time the install labor is estimated, it's executed above the allotted hours. You may think to yourself, okay, we've got one of two problems. We've got a sales problem with an estimating, we've got an execution problem. Now, in the podcast, I'm not going to teach you how to solve whether you've got an execution or estimating problem. So just go with me on assume we have an execution problem. We determine we have an execution problem on install. Well, then guess what standard we should probably set up first? We should set up our installation standard. And then our installation standard, right? So if I were to file new, we'll create this guy on the fly. I promise nothing since we are literally creating this on the fly, but we'd say installation standard. Okay, so what do we have on installation? Well, we have contractor line out. Okay, we have wire pulling. We'll just say wire pulling. Point-to-point checkout. Maybe we have trunk setup. I'm just spitballing ideas here, folks. And, you know, a lot of folks seem to go and really jack up contractor line out. They just really, folks don't place a lot of importance on it in my experience. All right, so how can we go and fix this? Well, we can say that we have a contractor line out procedure. So what does this procedure include? Well, this procedure may include things like job walk and doc review. Okay. This may include stuff like electrical details training. If you've been through our standards course, our install course, where we go and we do installation, you know that we're a big fan of electrical details. So you have a controller diagram and it references like EDO1, and EDO1 may be, you know, 120 volt, 2-position actuator installation. And literally we would train the contractor on this electrical detail and we'd say, okay, this is how you do it. And then it's clear. And so we'd have electrical details that we would line out to them. And maybe something to the effect of like spot check process, so that you don't get a electrician that does, you know, 100 air handlers only to realize on air handler 99 that they've been wiring the entire thing wrong. So you create, you know, a couple processes, the electrical details process, the job walk and doc review process, and you create supporting document around that. And then guess what? You train and empower your installers on how to do this. Once your installers, your installation tech is trained on how to do this, then they can go and line out the contractor, and you've just freed up, you know, typically a PM or senior tech who comes to do line out, and you train on that. And if you determine that's your number one issue, then guess what? This is our number one training. This is going to be our first training. And now we can go and we can implement this training, and we can track the techs who were trained on it, and we can track them from new job startup of, you know, job is booked and they start doing contractor line out, and do we see an improvement in that? And if we do, then we say, great, our process is good to go, our procedure is good to go, our standard is good to go. We ratify that and we build that into our employee onboarding and training. If we find out that that doesn't work, then we go and we actually visit the site and we watch, we observe the process. And if the process has gaps, we will detect those during the observation process. All right, I'm going to see if we have any questions so far. All right, looks good. Okay, let me bring up this now. Now, oftentimes folks will say to me, they'll say, Phil, how do you go and you map this out with a customer? How do you go and sit down and kind of from a consultancy perspective do this? Well, I like to do, this is kind of like, I call it a wishbone chart, or fishbone chart. Sorry, not wishbone. If you've ever seen a fish, you know, they got the head and then the tail and then the spining out. And what I'll do is I'll sit down with the customer and we'll say, okay, you have your submittal creation process. That's part of your engineering standard. Let's go and kick this off. And we're going to kick it off with a document review. Now, I know some of you are listening to this as a podcast or listening to it in the future as a podcast. Don't worry. If you go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/350, you'll be able to see a link to the video recording of this. But we have submittal creation right here. And we would say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what is the first thing you do in your submittal creation? Well, they'd say we do a document review. And we say, okay, what documents do you review? Oh, we review our MEPs, our specs, our scope of work. Right now, we're just trying to get everything on paper. We say, all right, what's next? Well, we create the submittals. All right, well, what do you create in the submittals? Well, we do a network riser, we do a bill of materials, a controller diagram, system diagram, etc. Then we say, okay, then what do you do? And they'd say, oh, well, we do submittal submission. And we say, okay, what do you deal with in submittal submission? Well, we often need to know the requirements. We often get, well, hopefully they don't often get rejections, but we sometimes get rejections and we need to know how to handle those. And then we'd say, okay, is that it? And they'd say, yeah, at that point, the submittal creation's done. Now, this may actually be a dependency of the as-built process. So the as-built process requires submittals being created before you can create as-builts. But you can see, right? So now that we have this, we can then go back to what I showed you earlier, and we can start to create our processes. Document review process, submittal creation process, submittal submission process. And these can have things in them like procedures and checklists. So submittal requirements. Did you go into section 1 of the specification? Did you check the sizing of the submittals? Did you go and check how many you're supposed to print? 11 by 17, or is it, some other size? Does it need to be in PDF? Does it need to get sent to a specific someone? All so you can avoid rejections so that you can speed up your time. And then we have a rejection log process. How do rejections get logged? How do we submit the RFIs and RFCs related to them? So what I hope you're seeing is you can map all this out, put processes in place, and then with those processes, you can go and you can then improve your business by automating your business, making it more efficient. Okay, let's take a look at let's discuss how you would do this, because at the end of the day, this is going to feel, at least, I don't know, maybe you feel this way. I would feel kind of overwhelmed. I'd be like, oh my gosh, this feels crazy overwhelming. How am I going to go and approach this? Well, the first things first, right, is we're going to list this out. Then we're going to list out our procedures. And then we're going to look at our job task data, or, just have conversations with our team and just discuss, where do we have an issue? Where do things seem to fall apart? And this is where radical honesty and transparency has to exist within your organization. If people cannot openly admit that they suck at something, then this won't work, because you have to have people who can be like, yeah, you know what? I don't think I do as good with this as I could. And once you have that honesty and transparency, then things become pretty easy, because then you are having an honest discussion. It's like, you know what? We are really not very good at sequence reviews. Our folks don't understand HVAC. Our folks don't understand how this all comes together. They don't know how to review sequences. And you say, okay, well then let's create a sequence review procedure. Let's use cheat sheets to augment that knowledge that folks don't have. So rather than having everyone have a PhD in central plant design, maybe we have cheat sheets that say, well, if you have a decoupled loop chillers with variable speed drives, this is the common sequence, this is the common wiring, and this is the kind of things you want to look for. So you would do that, then you would do a training on that, you would implement the procedure, and you would see if things improve. And guess what? Things improve. You set the procedure aside, and that's part of your process now, and you move on to the next procedure. And if you did 12 procedures a month, if you picked the 12 a year, do 12 a month if you can. But if you did 12 a year, if you picked the 12 things that your organization is most inefficient at, and you implemented a procedure and a training on that, one a month, you would see some dramatic results in your business. And this isn't just install, this isn't just programming, this is also sales, this is also marketing. Just the other day, I'm embarrassed to say this, but typically I have my team review before I send emails out, because I am known for bad spelling, grammar, missing things, etc. So sent out an email to everyone announcing this beta of this new community we're forming. And it literally said, edit this button, because I didn't have a procedure, which I now have, to go and double check everything. So now there's a procedure when emails go out that they are going to get double checked. Any buttons are going to be checked, because literally it said edit this button. And while I chuckle at that, at the same time, it's pretty embarrassing. It's why Phil Zito should not be sending out emails at night and should rather rely on the team to do that. But that's neither here nor there. That is an issue that will get addressed with a process moving forward and a procedure moving forward. And that's why, your marketing, your sales, your operations, everything can be processed and procedured. Let's see if there's any questions coming in, anything I can go and clarify for you. Like I said, on Wednesday, we are going to write a procedure and write a process together. I'm not sure which one we'll do, but we will do one. And I'll talk through kind of how do I do this? How do I write it up? How do you determine it? And yeah, so let's see. Any questions coming in? Let me refresh and double check. I'm going to actually switch off this and turn on video. There we go. So we're good to go there. Not seeing any questions so far. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? At the end of the day, like, all of this stuff is obvious. It's not like some rocket science and some, like Phil Zito's got this genius thing. It's just a matter of executing it. And I believe, based on our consulting engagements and my experience working with organizations, that it's not that people don't want to execute it. I was on a call this morning with an organization, and I was talking with our sales director about it, and I was just like, they are in the whirlwind. They want to do it. They see the value, but this guy's got so many things going on that he can't, just put his finger on what is the next step. And so that's what happens with this. It feels overwhelming, so then people don't take action. So my challenge to you listening to this right now, those of you who are listening, is to go and consider what is, one procedure that you can implement this month, the month of August when I'm recording this. What is one procedure you can implement that will improve your business? I mean, go and test me on this. Implement a procedure, train your team on it, and go and see how it improves. I'd love to hear from you about that. All right. As always, everything will be available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/350. Once again, that's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/350. I appreciate you all being here. I hope you found this valuable. If you did, do me a favor, wherever you're listening to this, like and share it and comment. That helps algorithms, which shares this information with more people. We do this 3 times a week for the price of free, so I hope you enjoy that. If you are looking to train your organization, speaking of processes and procedures, I highly recommend you take advantage of our free assessment. You'll find information for that at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/350. That assessment will enable you to go and pinpoint what your people do and do not know. So that way you make appropriate decisions in employee development and employee training. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I will see you on Wednesday, where we'll dive into this. Feel free to post your comments after the fact. I'll still read them. Oh, here we go. Got a couple coming in now. What are your thoughts on using submittal comments or Rfis as a feedback loop for process improvement? I absolutely think that should be part of your feedback loop. And that actually brings up a really good point, which is part of your procedure and process should have a feedback loop portion to it, a feedback loop component. What do I mean by that? So if you have a process for takeoffs and you are repeatedly noticing that people are missing in the notes things like backnet cards or installed by others or provided by others installed by BAS, things like that are being missed, then that should be a feedback loop mechanism. And that would be something like an Excel sheet or a Word doc that you could go and just type in these things and then share these things within your organization. All right. So that is something that definitely should be used. Feedback loops, I will tell you, are much more impactful if you have engagement of the teams they affect. So what do I mean by that? It's one thing to have a feedback loop on a submittal process, and you feedback the information that something was missed on the estimate. If the sales team is adversarial and not also on this same journey and willing to take that feedback and adjust and build it into their own processes, then you're not going to have as much effect. So you definitely should have feedback loops, but you also have to have a culture and an organization that is going to say, all right, we're all on the same page here. We're going to go and make changes based on what we have learned. Alrighty, I hope that answers your question. Let's see what other questions we've got. You're welcome. All right, you're good to go. And oh, do we have one right there? No, I thought that was another question. Okay, I'll give us like 30 seconds for another question to come in. Let me see how delayed this stream is here. What's going on? I'm going to see. All right. I'm curious. It's showing my audio is one-sided. What if I turn off stereo? Is that going to fix it? We're going to see. I wonder if that fixes it. All right, let's give you guys and gals 20 more seconds here. I want to see if this audio fixed. There we go. It's so interesting with technology how it just, you can't often tell how it's performing until it's performing. Let's see. Does it fix it? No. I gotta figure out why the stereo is not, this audio is coming in mono on one ear. All right, folks. Well, that being said, I'm going to give you all some time back in your day. Thanks for being here. I hope you all enjoyed it, and you all have an awesome rest of your week. I'll see you on Wednesday.